Hi there, I'm Jim Aroune, and welcome to Brown and White Ventures Podcast. This is a podcast that is formed to help you understand Brown and White Ventures, which is a venture capital fund built by alumni of St. Bonaventure University, and it is a venture capital fund that seeds startups as well as build returns for its partners with a focus on delivering at least 10% of its net profits as a charitable contribution to the university. You're going to learn more about the venture capital fund in this conversation, but more importantly, you're going to be learning about subjects important to venture capital, important to all of us. And that is going to begin today with the reality that nearly everything we talk about these days includes AI, artificial intelligence, and how that affects our lives and how that may pose something of a scare for some folks, wondering if they could ever get their hands wrapped around it the way they did maybe on the internet. And to help us understand AI better is Christopher Kanan, who is an associate professor at the Goergen Institute for Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence at the University of Rochester. He is also on the Scientific Advisory Board at Page. Christopher, we're glad you're here with us.
My pleasure.
Yeah, and I just had a wonderful experience over the holiday weekend. I got to explain to my mother-in-law, my 91-year-old mother-in-law, what AI was. And I thought that I did a decent job, but I know so very little about it, I'm wondering if I ever did. And as someone who does this for a living, and not just with mothers-in-law, but people who really need this information vitally, how do you start the conversation with what AI actually is these days?
It means so many things to different people that it's hard to even know where to start. But essentially, it's systems that can automate tasks that ordinarily would require a human or some other intelligence to do. The reason I say some other intelligence is that some of these things are so simple that we automate that a monkey could technically do it. But a lot of them are just at the frontier of what humans can do. So it's and the predominant method that we use nowadays learns from data. So that's basically the dominant method.
The idea that whether it's an LLM, whether you're going to ChatGPT, whether you're going to another AI model, they're constantly learning. They're getting smarter every time that you use them, and they're getting better and more efficient and more effective.
That's not necessarily true.
Okay.
So that's actually what my lab works on, is how do we make AI systems continue learning, so keeping them up to date. The way ChatGPT and these systems, large language models, learn is they kind of learn from all of written human text, and then they're kind of taught to be a good assistant and obey, and they don't keep learning. Now, what they do is OpenAI or whoever probably will retain your interactions with it in order to later update a system to create like a V2. Like you're basically creating a new training corpus for it to learn more, but it's not learning live from you in the sense that its internal neural network is changing. At best, it's learning what we call it a context window, kind of like the prompt. You think of it as it sees your previous prompt or whatever it said, the next prompt, whatever. So it sees all that. So, you can say that's kind of learning, but it's not updating itself. It's kind of like it's got instructions. It's reading those instructions, and once you start a new conversation, those instructions are tossed away. So, it's not. That's one of the things that a lot of people don't understand is that these systems learn once and then are deployed. It's not like you or me. We keep learning, hopefully, throughout our lives. We don't just learn once and then are deployed.
Yes, and then you have to learn all over again. This is at the very least disruptive. You started way back when AI was really arriving. You worked at NASA.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember what it was like when you wrapped your mind around the possibilities of this?
Not entirely, to be honest. So I've been working in this space for over 20 years. What got me interested in it was in high school in the 90s, actually. They had these old text-based games, and I was trying to create a bot to play it, and I didn't have any resources. It was pre-Wikipedia, pre-Google search. So it was hard to figure stuff out. So I kind of had to learn stuff. And then after I went to college, I took the one AI class as an undergrad. That was all I had available. And they taught me something called neural networks. And I said, that's the way forward. Why don't we do that? They said, well, it didn't work very well. So then I went and gained a lot of experience about neuroscience and was a big proponent of these neural networks. And then they, even during my PhD, which is over, oh gosh, I don't want to figure this out, too long ago, over a decade ago, it was still, AI wasn't popular and neural networks were the least popular area of AI. So I was really, and it turns out that was the way to go all along. So my instinct was right, maybe not on the neuroscience side, but yeah, that's, I guess what piqued what blew my mind was then whenever stuff started to really take off and work really well, like I believed in it, but the way things are working so effectively now, that's kind of just, it's hard to even fathom like a decade plus ago, especially now people will perhaps talk about it later, AGI. When during my PhD, if you mentioned that, professors would have told you, turn off the TV, stop reading your science fiction books, you're living in a fantasy land. Nowadays, everybody's talking about it. It's not a fantasy, or at the very least, it's in the dialogue, and everybody will take you kind of seriously. Whereas 10 plus years ago, you would not be considered a serious person if you said you were working in that.
The marvel of AI is so expansive in the sense that what a lot of people think out of the gate is how it'll affect everyday life with business, with commerce, with interactivity. We're going to put that on the shelf for a few minutes and talk about how the learning part of it and our ability to learn from it is really what's at stake here when it comes to the way you've spent your time letting people know what is possible with AI. You talk about universities really and the higher education industry being really at a crossroads here because of its arrival. Tell us what you mean.
I believe they're at a crossroads. They may not be really cognizant of it, but at the very least, students. So we kind of would like to believe this fantasy that the majority of students are going to college to better themselves and to get kind of enlightenment and become a better person. Blah blah blah. The vast majority of students are going there because they think this will increase their long-term economic potential and their social status, perhaps. So that's what they are there to get. And so then it's almost like just a credentialism, right? It opens doors to jobs, or at least it did in the past. But with AI, and specifically things like large language models, right, ChatGPT sorts of things, it can do the vast majority of the homework we give them very well. And maybe for the upper division courses, maybe it'll only get a B or a C. But even then, it can really accelerate the work. And for the lower division courses, basically, it can do it all, right? And a lot of students are using it to do their homework for them and do their other assignments. The only way you can really assess them now is go back to the in-person tests. So that's one aspect, is a college degree may not mean much after, I guess the post-ChatGPT era. You're like, well, they passed, but did they actually learn the material? So that's one aspect. A second aspect is these systems enable, lots of studies have shown this, novices to behave a lot closer to experts. So basically, you don't need to have perhaps a big degree to do something for a lot of tasks. The AI can augment you such that your output is substantially better than it otherwise would have been. So again, that might disincentivize people to go to college, right? Because you got to take loans, do this, do that. You might cheat your way through anyways, and so the AI really have that problem as well. However, the other angle is, well, I guess it's not a problem. It's a benefit, right? I mean, it's AI plus person, big improvement, potentially. The other big concern, which has been shown in the past 6 months or so, is a big decline in entry-level jobs, like the jobs you would get with a college degree starting. Why? Well, there's a couple hypotheses. One, people aren't hiring because they're able to make their more senior people more productive, right? I personally feel like I'm probably some X'd. I don't know exactly what, but for certain tasks, it 10Xs me or 100X me for those tasks. But many tasks I don't get much speed boost, like meetings. But other ones where I need to do work, I'm getting a lot more productive by using these tools, or using these systems. So that may be one hypothesis. The other one is, that's the main one I'm aware of. Yeah. Is that they're basically augmenting their existing employees. Oh, the other one is just automating. Sorry, so there is another hypothesis.
Surely,
it's just that they automated people, right? So there was one company, they had this internal memo which got leaked, which said if you have a new hire, I think they also said a backfill, you need to justify why that job can't be done with AI, and in your peer performance reviews, what we're going to do is you need to assess how well your peers, your colleagues, are using AI tools to accelerate themselves and derive benefits. So, I guess the notion is if one of your peers is not using it for whatever reason, they should be that should be noted on their record for potentially either telling them you got to fix this and start using it, or perhaps even terminating them because they're not maximizing their potential. I think that's the idea behind doing that.
We're going to have more with Christopher Kanan here at Brown and White Ventures podcast after a word about Brown and White Ventures. We told you off the top, it's the first of its kind venture capital fund around here, privately founded and operated by alumni from St. Bonaventure University and friends of the university. It is funded primarily by Bona alums. Now, Brown and White Ventures has invested in its first companies in 2025, companies you're going to learn about later in this podcast as well. The fund's limited partners commit to a charitable contribution to the university of at least 10% of its net profits. You're going to learn more about the fund by heading to the website at brownandwhiteventures.com. Christopher Kanan from the University of Rochester is here, and back very quickly to education. So if we have homework being done by LLMs, we have companies that are getting more out of their current workforce and have eliminated some of those entry-level jobs because of it. Where is the value to the student to head to the university, to head to college? Where does the value come into play? How do we meet the arrival of AI and still allow our younger people to grow as learners?
Well, that's tricky because why do we have homework? We have homework in order to have somebody do a task that the professor thinks will help them learn something, right? And so the students themselves are like, rather go to a party, or I don't really want to do this. Or even, hey, my colleagues are doing it, my peers, I should do this too. Otherwise, what if there's a curve, right? Or just for whatever reason, it's just laziness. So they're literally depriving themselves of knowledge by doing that, right? They're not doing the exercise to acquire the necessary knowledge. And certainly not everybody is doing this, but there are a lot of people, a lot of students are cheating, or without necessarily permission of the professor. On the other hand, if they don't learn to use these tools, right, because you're going to be expected to use them in the workforce, you're also kind of out of luck. You need to master these, and you're expected to be able to use them. And like I said earlier, it made me tremendously more productive. Do tasks that otherwise I would have been like, I just can't allocate the time to it. It greatly reduces the amount of time required. So the students really have to be self-motivated learners. And I think a lot of this will come back to college. My prediction is college will still be around, but not all the colleges, because I think enrollments are going to go way down. I don't think universities are preparing adequately for that, and they already have other reasons why enrollments are going to be going down. Namely, there's an enrollment cliff due to the Great Recession. People stopped having as many children. So literally, enrollments are going down. Universities keep spending. Mm-hmm. So they're going to be in trouble. But I think certain skills, like if you're self-motivated, you want to learn, and leadership, a broad base of knowledge, right? If you don't know what the words mean, how are you going to tell an LLM to do it for you, right? Mm-hmm. Like you need to have a breadth of knowledge.
Still need to be well-read so that you can, of course.
Yeah. So, they think, but that's the kind of stuff that college taught pre-World War II, when about 5% of people went to college. Nowadays, it's closer. I don't think it's at 50%, but it's not too far. It's over 40. Yeah. So I think we'll see switch back and probably vocational and trades for at least a while until robotics catches up.
So out of the idea of AI being able to X us all, and I love that becoming a verb. The idea that we will become exponentially more productive, and their workforce models will be that way too. So is that the only impact that AI makes as it arrives commonly across not only new businesses, but we're talking about long-time companies that need to keep up or survive?
Well, it depends, right? So can it increase your output multiplicatively? It's only certain things it can do that with, right? I mean, things like meetings are going to be made more efficient by necessarily having an AI. And there's lots of sales probably won't necessarily get impacted, but you might be using AIs to figure out who to sell to, or you might even be using it. There's this one company, this is their marketing. I don't think it's real, but their marketing materials, it's a company called Cluely. They've gotten a big recent round, but they have the nice, kind of like a video that went viral, where it's basically you wear an AR glasses, and when you're chatting with somebody, it tells you what to say, what to do. It's reading their emotions, trying to determine, hey, so you can think of it like a sales call, if you had such a device.
Yeah.
Continually saying, they don't like it, switch your pitch.
Yeah.
So maybe even that might be augmented. I don't know, but I don't think that's certainly not happening yet. So and a lot of automation. But let's keep in mind the main kind of AI we're talking about right now is the large language models.
Surely.
There's all sorts of other kinds, just like detecting things, recognizing things, doing a variety of other things.
Sure. And AI is artificial intelligence or augmented intelligence or something else. It all depends on which version is what you're saying.
Artificial intelligence. So augmented would be human plus AI. Usually we use the term co-pilot for whatever reason, right? It's you plus the co-pilot.
As long as we don't become the co-pilot, right? Right? And that face says everything about how people feel about AI.
Yeah, well, computer science is especially being affected by this. Who knew that would happen, right?
Yeah.
So the computer scientists are being really hit hard, both in terms of the education and the job opening aspect. And nowadays, I've seen these, a number of people basically saying this. They have the AI writing the code. My job is to check it for correctness. So rather than you doing the creative stuff, I'm going to create this thing, you're just checking to make sure the AI did it right. And so now it really is. You're kind of like the co-pilot. The AI, somebody needed to tell it what to do, of course. But, that might have been like a product manager or something saying, hey, make a new feature that does X. Okay, great. It wrote the code. Somebody check it.
And you are just there to check its work.
It doesn't sound very fun, does it?
No. So, all right. So you address companies. You've been called on to do this. What do you tell organizations about the balance of the benefits of AI with the potential for job displacement?
Well, you're talking about companies. Companies are, I think, really want to embrace this as much as they can, right? The AI is not going to complain. It can work 24 hours a day. It has access to a lot of information. You don't necessarily have to do on-the-job training, right? Or it's not going to need breaks. It's not going to file complaints or a lawsuit against you or something like this. So it has a lot of limitations, but it also has tremendous cost savings benefits, right? I don't think companies necessarily are looking to, hey, let's try to make sure everybody has a job and be employed, and let's just grow our staff for no reason. So I don't know. I think the companies are not going to be concerned about this. If anything, it's the opposite. They're like, how can we reduce staff? by using AI to get more out of our top performers.
Mm-hmm. That's the nature of it. And that's, that is what makes people recoil a little bit as they approach understanding this, is that they feel that as the co-pilot, they're going to have less. The idea of having institutional knowledge is not really going to be a benefit for the person, the professional. Heck, you don't even have to be a professional. You can be someone who just knows enough and has been around long enough to be counted on to get things right when they need to be right, and maybe that's part of the AI checking. But do you have to calm a lot of people down?
Good question. Calming, it depends on their concern.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what I'm concerned with is along the lines of our current conversation, but I can calm people down if they're worried about Terminator, Skynet, stuff like that.
Okay.
I have a lot of arguments for that. But for this, I don't calm people down. Actually, people hear me talk about these specific issues. Usually they're like, well, that was scary, or that's alarming. I'm like, well, at least you know, and you won't be caught completely unaware. Especially if you're not using this stuff, you're like, you're going to get replaced by somebody who is. But keep in mind, this is the current era, and we don't know where the next era is going to be, right? So now we're in this co-pilot kind of era, right? And where possible, complete automation, but that's more limited in many cases. But their ability to do human tasks all by themselves. One study showed it's, the length of the task is about doubling every 8 months that an AI can do. So it's getting better and better and better. So that's complete automation, right? So living in a world where everybody serves as a co-pilot to the AI sounds pretty darn depressing. On the other hand, if everything is automated, then one hypothetical scenario is this utopia. People only do the work they want to do. Everybody derives benefits. Why do we even have jobs? We made up the idea of a job, right? Somebody's got to do. Somebody's got to pick these fruit. Somebody's got to put up the grocery store. Somebody's got to do this and that. Unfortunately, all those examples are actually bad because those jobs, robotics is behind. So those things are still going to be there. But somebody needs to do your taxes. Somebody needs to write this screenplay. Somebody needs to do this and that, right? That's probably the most alarming thing to many people. And that's why I mentioned, the colleges, is that the stuff that's going to get automated or greatly reduced in terms of need, one person can do more, is the stuff people go to college for. Mm-hmm. It's the white-collar jobs, right? Mm-hmm. The blue-collar jobs are going to be around for longer, right? Vocational schools and things like that. Anything where you need to use your hands and need to be mobile, right? Because robotics it's a huge growth area right now, but it's going to lag behind. My guess is at least a decade for a lot of this stuff. It's going slowly, but it's improving.
Christopher Kanan from the University of Rochester is with us, and we're going to share more about AI after we talk to you about CAV, a company that uses AI to be successful in its earliest stages. CAV builds cycling helmets for people who live and love to ride. CAV builds those helmets very differently than any other company. It builds a new kind of manufacturing that operates like software without inventory. Its products are made to order, and here's how it does it. CAV's commitment to health and safety first, and AI-driven design begins when customers simply take a picture of their own head with an iPhone or anything else. That triggers the manufacturing process for this company. What it does is it uses AI to create 108 images of the individual's head, and from those images, a perfectly fit helmet is made using polymers that are absolutely proprietary to CAV. They are spun on 3D printers, and they are delivered one of one only. Of course, many who choose CAV often purchase more than one of those helmets because they love the safety and they appreciate the speed with which they ride when they wear them. CAV's newest model, Roan, is out, and its plan for a new model to hit the roads in the weeks ahead is coming up. So if you'd like to learn more about CAV helmets, just go to cavhelmets.com. CAV is a portfolio company of Brown and White Ventures. Jim Aroune with you on Brown and White Ventures podcast. We're glad you're here, and we are glad that Chris Kanan is here, and he is telling us more about not just AI as we have kind of, if we're not immersed in it for work or for pure curiosity, we are getting whiffs of it. And most of it is, when you get bits of information, they can never be fully relied on, which is why we have conversations like this one with you. Thank you for letting us have that. But what folks are talking about mostly are societal and maybe even psychological impact. We began to talk about that at the end of the last segment. How might greater interactions between humans and AI systems actually reshape our social structures?
That's tricky, and depends on what kind of interactions we're having, right? Like, and the context here in terms of like, are we talking about the economics of it all or just using the AI? So in terms of one kind of, at least currently very depressing to me, is there's a company called Character.ai. And what they do is they create, basically they adjust a large language model to have a particular character, right? Daenerys Targaryen or whatever, whoever. Basically, what people are doing is having, now the company claims that what they're doing is doing role playing for different scenarios. Like, hey, I want to ask my boss for a raise. Let's rehearse, right? I'll rehearse with it. What they're doing is, and who are their primary users? Teenagers and college students. They're having fake relationships, right? Fake friendships, fake lovers, right? And these are not self-aware AIs. They don't have any sort of consciousness or anything like that. So even if you're like cool with the AI human love, right? This thing isn't like that. It's literally just kind of like a super autocomplete in many ways for the kind of AI that they're using. And people are taught it, apparently, according to Character, believe they said it's roughly 1/3 of the search volume of Google is equal to the amount of interactions in terms of bandwidth that these kids are having with these machines or with their bots. I mean, to me, I think it's a very bad way. It's kind of like social media for kids. Probably not a good idea. This is probably much worse. And there have been there's one case of somebody committing suicide to be with their AI lover. Then so some reactionary legislation about that. But anyways, I just find it very depressing that people just chatting with this chatbot.
Well, right. And it's and there's a real, again, going back to the idea of the apprehension of what we don't know. We do know that for the last 20 to 25 years, social media changed a generation.
Yeah.
And so here we come with something much more powerful, much more limitless. And let alone whether there are kids, I don't know if we can keep them from it. I hope that there's an ability to do some of that, but also, what we need to do as citizens to be aware of what AI does to help us and what it does not.
Yeah, it's like any technology, right? You can do some amazing things with it or do some really bad things with it, right? Nuclear power, nuclear weapons. You got electric chairs or, televisions, right? You can do all sorts of different things. You can make fireworks, you can build a gun, right? Like all these things. So a lot of it is, how do we choose to use it? And how do people, in terms of like the children, right? What are they allowed to do? For some things you can imagine, hey, why do we have schools? Why don't we all have personalized tutors? We know students benefit a lot more, like rather than a mass market, hey, in this class, everybody's got to be at the same level versus, hey, this student's learning a lot faster. Nope, you got to learn the same stuff that this other student hasn't figured it out yet, right? You could have personalized tutors. You could do all these amazing things, right? That's a huge benefit. On the other hand, you can have a bunch of fake romantic relationships or use them just to cheat at everything and do these things and deprive yourself of A, social interactions with a real human, or B, knowledge because you didn't learn. So that's just within the scope of what we were previously talking about. So it's really about how do we use them, and what are we allowing people to? How are we allowing? I mean, I'm big on personal freedom, so I'm not saying the government should necessarily legislate this stuff, but at the very least, parents need to be like paying attention to this. And even this is like, why is this 13 years old? 13 years old is the requirement to sign up, right? So I don't know.
Do we have any information from the years already invested in understanding AI that helps us chart human interactivity and how these tools affect us?
Sorry, can you say it again?
Do we have any knowledge to date that tells us how these tools affect our human interactions?
I'm not, it really is like got to be posed more narrowly, I think, in terms of how they might affect our interactions, especially since some of these things are fairly new. I mean, there have been studies on like educational like benefits and things like that, or perhaps, costs to this, but it's very like narrow. I think, like social media probably has been a net negative for humanity, but it took a while for people to figure this out. A lot of the recent developments in AI are new, right? And so I think some of this stuff was be sorted out. We'll probably know more in the next few years. But
Christopher Kanan from the University of Rochester joining us here on Brown and White Ventures, and we're learning a lot, and we're glad you're here. And we're going to talk more about AI after we share a little bit more about Council Stack, which is another Brown and White Ventures portfolio company. This is a company that is made by lawyers for lawyers. It is a legal research platform born for growing law firms and solo practitioners in need of powerful tools. Council Stack's developed what it calls a reliable AI research platform that leverages LLMs that exhibit sound legal reasoning. And from clocking attorneys' time to completing forms, Council Stack Suite puts attorneys in the driver's seat to accelerate a practice's research, document review, form completion, and drafting workflows. Council Stack is an investment of Brown and White Ventures, and you can learn more about Council Stack. You can learn more about Council Stack at councilstack.com. University of Rochester's Goergen Institute for Data Sciences and Artificial Intelligence is where Christopher Kanan is joining us from today. And that institute, for everybody's understanding, provides what on a daily basis to this constant growing field?
So we call it GIDS-AI. So GIDS-AI, it was originally just GIDS, and then they tacked on AI.
Okay.
The data science and AI are very closely linked, right? The data kind of comes from, what does it learn from, right? Data.
Sure.
Right? So it was renamed earlier, I think this year. But basically, it's an educational institution, right? So it's a part of the University of Rochester. My primary affiliation is with computer science, but then GIDS-AI has most of my computer science colleagues are part of it, and many colleagues who are in other departments are part of it. Basically a hub to bring people together who are working in data science and AI and applied or applying it. And also we have a Bachelor of Science and Master of Science programs in data science, and maybe soon we'll have some degree programs in AI.
How much of the conversation in those lecture halls and classrooms focuses on something you mentioned earlier, which is government and the ability to perhaps not contain, but moderate AI as it arrives? And what are you talking about?
It's a good question. I can't really talk to what the other professors talk about in their classes. For me, I do mention these things fairly frequently. And whenever I am teaching a course, students are often late. So I usually fill like 5-ish minutes with the AI news. And one of the things we talk about is frequently like what's going on in terms of these regulations or the government's impact. To be honest, I am skeptical of government regulation of AI. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like regulate applications, but how do you regulate this generic thing, right? That you can do so many things with. There's many different kinds. It's kind of And they don't know how to regulate it either, right? When at best they're like, okay, if you use this much power or you use this much in terms of compute to train it, you need to let us know. I mean, it's like, okay, that's kind of limited versus something so I was previously head of AI at this company called Page, where we worked on and we got the first FDA cleared system for helping pathologists to diagnose cancer, right? We had to go through the FDA, right, to get this application cleared, right? So they evaluate this application. So, it's an application, not just a broad thing
Right.
to try to regulate. So, yeah, and to be frank, there are I've looked at a lot of really poorly written state laws in New York regarding AI that just don't make much sense.
Is there any way that you could address people who say this will overtake humanity?
It depends on what you mean. So, will the existing systems overtake humanity? I would say no, even if we level them up a lot. Like large language models are going to overtake us. I like to think of it, if you are somebody who watched Star Trek, or especially Star Trek Next Generation, they have the computer, right? They always talk about computer do this, computer do that, computer make this, computer do this, right? That's kind of like where I think the end goal would be for this current kind of technology, right? The computer. Somebody needs to tell it what to do. And it can automate a lot of things, but you need to tell it to automate that, right? And it can help you, but you need to know what to say to it, right? If you can't pose the question to the computer, it can't give you an answer. So you need to know what the words mean. So with this current technology, that's the way I see it going. And the biggest risks are with that direction is that human labor is rapidly becoming losing its value as a commodity, right? So we're depreciating. Our human labor is depreciating, right? On the other hand, you can think of it as, hey, I got this, as these things continue to level up, I got this super intelligence. I got this great idea for a company. Rather than I need to raise a ton of money, hire a big team, da-da-da-da-da, I got the AI. And if I have the vision, I have the command, I know what I'm trying to do, maybe I could do a lot with a much smaller team and just this, right? I command it to do it whatever I need. On the other hand, the same sort of scenario could be quite dystopian if it was controlled by nation states, or companies, right? That's kind of a dystopian one where we don't have jobs in terms of like intellectual jobs, at least. We'll see how the robotics catch up. And a lot of people are unemployed and very depressed and saying, why did I go to college? So that's once, there's different ways this could go, but just think, if the end goal is for this kind of AI, ship's computer that can do so many things, what's going to happen, right? Are we going to, again, I'm a bit of a Trekkie, or at least I watched Star Trek Next Generation as a kid, right? They lived in a utopia, but they had some backstory that, of it being very hard to get there with a lot of turmoil. And now they're kind of like, I don't know if they're communists. Who knows what their economic system is? There's a book called Trekonomics. I haven't read it yet. But basically, it seems like they're post-scarcity, right? Everybody can have, normal things if you want them, but certain things will always remain scarce, like land, right? Incidentally, there are some people who are buying lots of land. I think Bill Gates is the largest or second largest now landowner in the United States. So, he's thinking about this stuff. Mm-hmm. What's always going to be valuable? Human labor is not it. So, yeah. Anyways, so I kind of got sidetracked there, I think. But so that's the end. So I don't know. Does this answer your question, kind of?
It absolutely does.
But I mean, a lot of people are scared of, is it going to kill us? Right? Well, in some ways, maybe, but those are where we told to do that, right? Who's also investing a lot in AI? Well, the military and military contractors, right? And already we have autonomous drones and stuff that can do things. But we told them to do that, right? So the real fear is not, is it going to kill us? It's going to kill us, but on its own, right? Where it just decided, get rid of them. That with the existing kind of AI, right? These large language models and agentic AI, which is really just a large language model with as its brain, and then kind of like give it tools and give it a few things. I think it's pretty unlikely, and I really don't think it's going to be motivated or have I don't think it's not going to have motivations. It's not going to have desires. At best, it somehow could have read about this scenario in some book, right? We gave it everything, right, including villains, but it's not going to be able to mass kill everybody, right? Unplug it, and even then, I really think this is hype. Really, it doesn't think, right? It's not processing unless you talk to it. It doesn't keep thinking. It hasn't, if we sit here quietly, right? Your brain didn't turn off, right? You have thoughts still, right? It doesn't. It doesn't keep thinking. It only talks. It only thinks when you talk to it. So the existing technology, no. Could any technology do it? Maybe some other form. It depends on if you think there's something magical about human intelligence. What the philosophers would call me a machine functionalist, so I don't think there's something magical here. So I think it's possible to create a future AI system that is self-aware and has motivation, desires, but but nobody knows how to do that. And even people who are scared that the existing stuff is going to get us there, they're wrong, I think. I'm very, very, very confident about this. I taught a whole class trying to tease this, teaching a new class, it was a seminar on artificial general intelligence. The whole purpose was, for the students to learn something, but for me to kind of sort this out. What are the necessary conditions? What are the necessary things you might need to get to that scenario? And so in doing that, just thinking, well, what makes us have these capabilities, right? And in doing that, I don't think we have the necessary, I would say, architectures, we call them neural network architectures, and mechanisms to enable any of those abilities. And we also don't know how we would teach it. So I'm going to rule out that scenario as a near-term threat. But I think it certainly, could be something that happens one day, if that makes sense. I'm saying it's possible, but not the current wave isn't that. I don't know if that makes people more scared or less scared, but I always believe that, right? I always believe, hey, we could create these systems, but, that's why people just laugh you out of the room if you start bringing it up. It's kind of like a fantasy, and that it always seemed like, well, that's like hundreds of years off.
And there must have been a movie about it sometime.
A few. I think there were a few. They're probably getting more and more and more of them. There's a show on Apple right now about this.
Christopher Kanan from the University of Rochester. Really appreciate this overview and learned a lot here. Just asking basic questions, which I guess is the nature of AI anyways, right?
Yeah. Happy to be here, and I hope I was able to at least make people not scared of Terminator.
I think you've succeeded. You've succeeded.
I hope.
We're glad you joined us here, and we will get you ready for another conversation coming up next. We're glad you joined us for Brown and White Ventures Podcast.